Hello, my name is Leslie Kane, and I am the host of the Why Not Today podcast. This is a podcast to celebrate people who have been courageous and said, why not today? I started this podcast in honor of my father, Patrick Kane, who often did say, why not today? I am based in Reston, Virginia, a planned community right outside of Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us today. So my guest today, and I always say I'm excited about my guests, and I am always excited. My guest today kind of started in talking about her being guest several years ago. And I'll never forget, I was walking out by my house and ran into a friend of mine. He's like, I want to be on your podcast. and I'm like, what have you done courageous? And he was like, I don't know, but you need to talk to Mina. And he was telling me, so my guest today is Mina Lucks, and he was telling me about your story of your traveling. And so I reached out to you, and it was literally a year or so because you were going through a lot of life.
Yeah.
I mean, come to find out, you literally I can throw a rock from my door and hit your house. That's how close you live to me now. And we met several years ago at a chamber. I do distinctly remember one Christmas, right before Christmas, coming into your office and chatting with you and just talking about downtime. And I don't know, I felt a connection there. And then, you being here and walks and life happening, and really have connected with you. And I'm super excited to finally have you as a guest on the podcast. And you did an adventure, and we will talk about that and some of your courage stories. So, Miss Mina Lucks, introduce yourself quickly with about your bio and a fast fun fact.
Okay. So thank you, Leslie. I'm so excited. I really enjoyed watching our friendship grow over the last couple of years, and it's been a long time coming to get to this point. So I'm excited. Yeah. We're finally connecting. It's awesome. A little bit about me. I've been in this area most of my life since I was 9. I kind of grew up in Springfield. I've been in Reston for a couple decades now, so native Virginia, and had a little bit of an unusual background, which will kind of tie into my story. But a fun fact is that I think I was a really angry youth. I didn't realize it, but I was a metalhead. First concert I went to was Judas Priest. And
oh, wow.
Look at me and never think that.
No, never in a million years would think that. That's fun. All right, so let's talk about courage. What does courage mean to you?
So courage to me means, really following that intuition. You get that gut, you get that little instinct of a pull towards something that's usually very uncomfortable or just makes no sense. You're like, I don't know why, but I think I need to do this. And not having, not taking the time to talk yourself out and be like, okay, I'm going to be led by that feeling and that intuition and see where this goes. I feel like courage just requires that of us to really attune into what is next for us and start going for it and figuring out where it's going to land.
Yeah, so believe in that and just trusting that gut that tells you to do something.
Yeah.
And I have found really, my life basically has followed that path, but really with this podcast, it is leading me to people in conversations. And who would have known that conversation I had with, we'll call him out in case he listens to it, Raj, which is a whole nother crazy coincidence. But whoever would have known that conversation would have led to, not just you as a guest as a podcast, but reconnecting as friends. And we've been through a journey together in the last couple of years. And just so following that gut, and I did keep reaching out to you. You just kept popping up in my head. It wasn't that I was stalking you to go for a walk or to see you, but when you popped in my head, and I've really tried to be true to that in my world, when I think of somebody, to reach out to them.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and I think that's courage to not get in your head and say, well, they're going to think I'm stalking them. I'm bugging them. I just felt like we had a connection. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, and what I loved about the perseverance in that and not stalking feeling at all, I felt very cared for, and I was going through a tough time in my life and was kind of more of an introvert and just taking some time to figure myself out. And you reaching out on a periodic but nice spaced out, I was like, okay, I'm still in her world and I still matter to this person that I'm just getting to know. And so it was a beautiful way to show and to feel cared for by your not getting into your head of well, she's not really responding. I was going through something and you were just giving me the
I didn't really know the whole truth of what was going on. Yeah. And so I think, that's absolutely courage. Listen to that intuition. Listen to that voice. I always say, listen to the first voice, not the second voice that talks you out of the first voice.
Yes.
But do the thing and, why not today?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your adventure. I mean, I know you've done courageous things. You have a business, and we'll mention that Synergy. Is it Synergy Design?
Synergy Design and Construction. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So we're a design build firm right
Yeah,
here.
you don't look like a construction girl. You're glamour girl. So, but you had an adventure. So let's talk about that and how do you want to, what motivates you to do that? And let's talk about the adventure and what you learned through the adventure. And I'll kind of tie in how it ties to me. And I always talk about my dad, and it definitely ties into my dad. So
Perfect. Yeah. So, so my adventure, well, this adventure, I should say, started back in around 2019. I was about to turn 50. So I think I was just really looking at my life and looking at what was going on for me. They talk about midlife crisis. I didn't feel like it was a crisis, but I just really started looking inward and saying, am I happy in the relationship, the marriage that I was in at that time? Am I happy with my business and where and how it's showing up right now? And I didn't have any answers. I just knew that I was kind of frustrated and wasn't sure what to do. And I was out to dinner with my husband at the time. And it was something that, I'll talk a lot about spirit or whatever. I feel like spirit just came right out of my mouth. I said, I don't know. I just feel like I need to take a couple months and drive across the country by myself or something. And it literally came out and I was like, who said that? Like, I haven't been thinking about this my entire life. Like it wasn't something that was like written down in my goal or my journal.
not your bucket list.
No, it just shot out of my mouth. And next thing you know, the next day he asked me, he's like, so have you figured out when you're leaving? Because he knows me when I get my mind to something, I kind of just do it. And I was like, yeah, I think this October, it was 2019. I was like, I think leaving the beginning of October and then coming back right before the holiday would be perfect. And so that's what I did. And 2019, like October, whatever the first Monday in October was, I hit the road and it was so
What a
fun.
perfect time in the world to
Oh,
have done that. Not if you would have waited, it would have been a whole different world.
yeah, I had no idea. I came
Yeah.
back at the very end of it and COVID hit. Like I just hadn't, it was literally right before COVID
So
happened.
how much time between when you blurted out, I want to go cross country till you got in your car and left? And you're running a business too, like
Yeah.
pulling yourself out of a business.
Exactly. We were running the business together. We have a very strong team. And so I knew that I could, log in remotely and be a part of client meetings if needed. But I also knew I was very supported by the team. And Mark knew that, my husband at the time knew I needed to follow what was leading to me and leading me in that direction. So, he supported that decision as well, even though it meant kind of uncertainty for us.
Yeah. So how long between when you made the decision and when you got in the road?
It was like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, within a month. Yeah.
Okay.
And it
And
was good.
I was going to say, did you plan it ahead or you just jump in the car and go?
Yeah, so I planned it ahead. And
Okay.
of course, I'm an entrepreneur. So I first started turning it into a work thing. So I'm like, okay, we were just talking about, I love videos and I love interviews and I love that type of stuff. So I brought my camera equipment with me, a bunch of outfits, and I decided I was going to go around the country and interview women construction owners,
Oh,
other
wow.
people like me. So I'm like, oh, I'll just do like some video, like not podcasts, but just interviews. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that's a great thing to do. So I started charting my course. I'm like, oh, I'll go up the East Coast and go visit so-and-so up in Boston. I found a couple people kind of around the country and just started kind of spacing them out of what I thought I would do. So yeah, it was a little bit of planning in that regard of just like where I
Okay.
was going to be when, at least the first couple. And I was like, oh, I'll
Did you
figure out the rest.
did you reach out to friends? Did you stay with friends? Did you stay at hotels? Did you have a camper?
It was a combination. I wish I had had a camper back then. But it was a lot of Airbnb, some hotels, and then some camping. So when I got over on the West Coast, I love to camp. So I brought my tent and that type of stuff. So I camped as much as I could. But it was October, so going
Yeah.
straight up into the Boston and Maine area was chilly. So and yes, I did stay with friends. There was a former employee, used to be a carpenter of ours, lives up in upstate New York. So I stayed with him. As people started understanding what I was doing on Facebook and everything, I just started getting these invitations left and right. Oh, if you're coming my way, and so then sometimes I would like go their way. I'm like, okay, I'll go stay with this person. So it
Wow.
just started having a life of its own.
Did you stay in places very long?
There were
So you were gone 3 months?
2 months. I
2 months.
planned
Okay.
on 3, but I did it in 2. And it was funny, just to circle back, I did like 1 or 2 interviews with people, and I realized this isn't about work. This is for me. This is a
Yeah.
once in a lifetime. Not many people get a chance to do this. So I put my camera equipment in the trunk. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to follow my heart and follow where I was being led, which was
Right.
work related. So yeah, I ended up going to friends. I ended up staying in Sedona for almost 10 days. I fell in love with that. I love
Yeah.
the West Coast. So I went up to well, part of the journey too, what I started realizing is I wanted to go to a lot of places that I was little, because I said I grew up in Springfield since I was 9, but before that I lived in 8 places before the age of
I was
10.
going to say, wasn't there a story about your mom and her
Yeah.
travels?
Yeah, exactly. So I had a very unusual upbringing. My mother, I never knew my dad, and my mother was a hippie. Literally, I was conceived at Woodstock. So,
Wow.
and so one of her many, many jobs, and I grew up, or I was born on the West Coast. So I lived in a lot of different places over there, in Missouri, Oklahoma, like I said, 8 places before the age of 10. So she was a long haul truck driver as one of her last career or whatever. And she
Wow.
had died in an accident at a particular bridge. So I went to the bridge where she passed, and let that go through and allow myself to grieve and really kind of delve into that part of my life, and my connection to her and disconnection, because that was a long time ago. So it became a real big healing journey for me.
Did you start out thinking it was going to be that way?
No, I thought I was going to interview women better.
Isn't it amazing how that happens?
Oh my God, the path just totally opened up and changed for me. And I
And
felt so loved and supported by the people that were reaching out and giving me a free place to stay. Right after I went to that bridge, my friend's like, "Oh, my friend's got a beach condo in Oregon. You can just use that because it's off season," and was gifted this place to stay for 3 nights. It just allowed me to, again, process and go on to a deeper level of all that pain that needed to be processed.
and you were working through the courage of the intuition too, that we talked about in the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just being led. And
Hmm.
yeah, you planned it, but isn't that interesting how we have a plan and then God throws it up in the air and says, I'm going to take you this way instead. Just
Exactly.
totally shifts the plan and
Yeah.
the open up of people. And I think when you're open, then people are very generous.
Yes, so much so. It's like that energy is met, it's like you're open, so then the path just kind of opens up and people meet you where you are. I stayed with people and in places that I never would have if I'd been on my work journey that I had started it out
Yeah. And that's
at.
so true. We need to let go
Yeah,
and fill our cup. And that's
yeah,
one of the things I've been talking about a lot with people is we need to fill our cup. We are just
yeah,
exhausted surviving. And
yeah.
after the last 3 years of really surviving and having to recreate businesses and do so many different things, and I
Mhm.
think people are looking at, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And what can I do? And I've thought about this trip adventure many times. When I was 16 years old, I don't know what possessed my father to do this or my parents, but they bought an RV
Uh-huh.
and we went cross country for 5 weeks. Now,
Yeah.
that's crazy enough. He owned his own business, so he could work on the road. And it's funny how much I'm so much like him because the last few years I have done not necessarily travel cross country, but literally we had some stops of places where he grew up in California and different things. So that was where he was from. But a lot of it was like we would get up in the morning and we would grab the then camper book. He promised my mother that we would stay in hotels majority of the time. But we actually, I think we stayed in 1 or 2, stay in the camper. Now, the other really crazy thing about the story, and I need to interview my mother on this about this, is there were 5 of us kids at that point. My youngest sister, the first 4 of us, I was 16, so Chris was 12. Catherine, Amanda wasn't born yet. Catherine was 5 weeks old when we left.
5 weeks?
5 weeks. She spent
Wow.
the first 5 to 10 weeks of her life on the road in a camper. Is that
Wow.
crazy? And I didn't appreciate it. Like the fact that my dad took 5 weeks from work to go on a road trip with us. And literally we would get the camper book out when we woke up because we were teenagers
Hmm.
and pick where we wanted to go, stay, because based on what pools and what amenities they had. And then
Yeah.
we'd stop at early afternoon, and my dad would go to the payphone and
Mm-hmm.
start working. But so many cool lessons, and looking back, that I thought I really want to duplicate it. Actually, after Raj told me about you that night, I went to bed and I made a list of the Why Not Today road trip
Oh,
and
wow.
all the places. And I know people all over the country, all the places I wanted to go and see. And eventually, I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I always wanted
It's
somebody to
good
go with me, but I'm thinking it's probably got to be a solo journey.
it's nice to be able to do that. You know, it really is to just to kind of have that time for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love getting in the car and driving. So, all right. So, lessons learned,
Oh, lessons learned.
or
Again.
your favorite places, or your favorite people, or
So one of the
did you
favorite
make new friends that you never knew? And are you still connected to people on the road?
Well, yeah. So a couple questions there. So my favorite place I'll share, it was I decided to go when I hit California to a number of the places that I'd lived. And so I went to this one place, it's called Sunset Beach. It's right near Huntington Beach, right in LA. And I pulled up, I just found the place. Like I looked online to figure out what it looked like. I remembered it in my mind because it was my happiest childhood memories. And I just pulled up and I went to the beach. I just started crying because I just felt that energy. I was like, oh my God, I remember these, volleyball nets in the sand
Right.
type of thing. Just knew I was in the right place. And then I walked directly to my house that I had not seen since I was 7 years old. Like I just went right to it. So that was my favorite place. I ended up staying there for 2 nights in a hotel and like ended up going to this little bar that was in this little community. And I had a drink for mom, with the
Aw.
locals. And so it was really, really cool. Um, Lessons learned. Oh my God. Again, obviously following your gut and that type of thing, allowing yourself to be really, open to whatever happens and to allow yourself to put yourself out there. Because I could have done this very quietly, but I went ahead and put it on social media, and I'm not a big social media person. I don't post a lot. But I said, you know what? I'm putting it out there. And that's what opened the doors for me. And so, yeah, somebody that I didn't know that well, I knew of her and we had met at networking events, is Sam Horn. He was like a author of a bazillion books. She's extremely famous.
Oh,
And she was like, oh my God, if you come to Colorado, come and stay with me. And I stayed with her for 2 days. She opened up her home. We went out to dinner. She gave me writing tips on how to write a book. And I mean, she was just so generous. And, it's just, I had that happen over and over and
right.
over.
I might
Just
need her contact information for my
sure,
podcast.
absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, there's just
Yeah.
no words
People
for it.
people are very generous and people want to help, and
Yeah.
but we don't ask.
Yeah.
And so being open to asking, and I love that you put it on social. And I love and hate social media, that I didn't even know about any of this.
Hmm.
No idea all these things were happening.
Right, I know. It's connection, but then it's not. So it's like, how do you ever gather enough information? You just wait for the algorithms to put the right thing in your feed. So it's a little odd,
Yeah,
the whole thing. But
exactly. So I don't want to talk about bad things, but did you have any struggles or anything that took the courage to plow
yeah,
through and do?
yeah, I think it was an interesting time in my life, and we can go back to kind of when we met, and I was kind of going through it that we kind of hinted at. I came back from the trip, and then COVID hit very shortly thereafter, and so I just kind of went back into my life. Went back into my business, went back into my marriage, and just said, okay, I feel better because I just did all this healing. So it's like, okay, then everything must be fine, because I just kind of went back to life as it was, especially when COVID hit, because it was just like, oh my God, the world's ending. Like, what's happening here? So it took me a couple more years to realize, oh no, I do actually need to make a choice and a decision to leave the relationship. And then actually put more energy back into my business. So I ended up, getting a divorce, and that's when we met and was kind of going through that process, and then purchasing him out of the company, running Synergy. We've had this for 15 years. I've been running it for myself now a year and a half, and honestly, we've never been doing better. The team is incredible. The clients are
Awesome.
incredible. And I just have this whole new life and energy to me, really being able to kind of steer it the way in the direction that I want based on the foundation that we had created together. So it really all ended up in the end, great for everybody, but it took me a couple years to figure it out, even after my trip, because I just kind of went right back into that old cycle. So the hardest part, that second level of courage, was making a choice to leave that relationship. Kind of in the eyes of everybody. A lot of people in Reston know us and
Right.
know of our journey and knew of my trip. And then 2 years later to say, oh no, I actually am leaving. Like it was a little odd. And that took probably the most courage I've ever had in my life, was to make that choice.
Well, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely. And
But we
and
all ended up good, both of
and
us.
I can see how happy you are
Mhm.
and how much you love your business. And, those of us that own our own businesses, we do love our business and we love to work. And, one day I reached out to you and it had been a Sunday, I think, and you said you went to the office and just worked till late into the night. And
Yeah.
that's when we love what we do and we have that passion, we want to work.
It's
Um,
not work. It
it's
really
not.
is. It's
And
our
I have a good friend of mine that works for the school system, and
Mhm.
people that work like that 9 to 5, that whatever hours,
Yeah.
they don't get it.
Mm-mm.
Um, and I'm like, yeah, I'll work 7 days a week, but I can take 3 hours off on a Tuesday. And, I have that flexibility
Oh
and
yeah.
I love what I do and it's fun to me. And
Yeah.
you can tell it's fun for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the flexibility of being able to get my hair done on a Tuesday in the middle of the day, or if I need to go to the grocery store, there's no lines because I'm not in the evenings or
Well, there
weekends.
used to be a lot more flexibility or a lot more ease in doing things on during the week. But now it seems
Yeah.
like everybody is out all the time. There's nobody that works in Northern Virginia, it looks like.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yes. So anything else you want to share about your trip or?
Well, I will tell you, so I think it's fun in that when I got over to the West Coast as part of my trip, I love going down the Pacific Coast Highway, so the whole California
Beautiful, yeah.
thing.
We did
And
that in a 25-foot RV, by the way.
25, oh my gosh.
And at 16, I drove a lot. My mom drove for 45 minutes, and my dad and I drove the rest of the time.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
16. Just got my driver's
You've had
license.
great experience then.
Yeah.
You're a great driver, I'm sure, because of that.
I don't know.
Yeah, when I was over there, I was like, I love this, but I was kind of on a time schedule. I had to go like to meet somebody else that had invited me or whatever. So I'm like, I'm coming back here and like renting a camper and really spending some time on the West Coast. So I actually did that just a few weeks ago, right around the holidays. I flew over to California, rented a camper, and spent 10 days over there. Visiting a friend and then going out to Yosemite and just really enjoying myself. And so that was kind of a bucket list, a promise that I had made to myself. And I got so inspired because I've always loved camping. I'm, always usually in a tent and everything, but I came back, I'm like, all right, I'm getting myself a little camper. So I literally just bought like a
Oh, did you?
two-person camper. It's one of those teardrop campers. I can tie it or tug it behind my Jeep, which was another thing that I purchased last year. So just finding that new energy and what really lights me up. So I'm excited. Yeah, I have a nice little camper that I can camp out at in the weekends. I can't wait for the nice weather. And
Oh, fun.
yeah,
Well, I'm not a camper, but maybe you'll convince me to try it sometime.
there you go.
So, well, how would you encourage somebody else to go on the trip, for do the things, to listen to their intuition, to be
Yeah.
courageous and say, why not today?
Yeah, I think because it's I'm thinking right now of the movie The Matrix. It's
I've
like,
never seen that. I need to see that.
well, you're given a choice. The guy's given a choice very early on of going one direction or another, and the guy who's offering the choice says, "Well, you know kind of where this one takes you. You're welcome to continue down this path, or you can go to this one that doesn't." So I think the courage, or if it's a trip, or if it's just taking a path that you haven't been, it's a little bit more uncomfortable, but yet it feels right to you, or there's this pull, you know where you're at, you know where that ends, quote unquote. So go that
Right.
other path. And I think that's always been kind of a not a motto, but I think it's kind of helped push me along when something, instead of just staying in my cocoon, say, oh, but it's really comfortable right now. It's like, no, let me just go and find out where this leads. And it's kind of scary, but it's exciting, and let's figure it out. And just know that you're held by friends, family, the energies that surround you in your life here and beyond, quite frankly.
And isn't it so true that when we walk out of that comfort zone and do the things that are a little scary, that there's always blessings behind it? There's
Always.
you just never know. And if you stay in the little cocoon and don't try anything, you're missing out in so many blessings. I
Yeah.
often quote Daniel Pink, who wrote a book about regrets.
Mhm.
And he talked about you rarely regret something you did. We
Yeah.
always regret the things we didn't do. And so just do it. And I always play the game in my head. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Exactly.
When I quit my job, it was like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Right.
The Mary Kay business didn't work and I'd have to get another job. And that was
Yeah.
4 years ago.
Right.
So, starting the podcast, doing the things.
Hmm.
And sometimes, and I know the struggle's real for people. Sometimes the why not today is getting out of bed.
Yeah. I've been
And,
there.
and there's blessings behind it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just,
I mean,
you
mental
just,
health is no joke. And sometimes we get to those cycles in our lives that are really, really have us go in and go digging and kind of get through that pain. But on the other side is that freedom and that, it's almost like the seasons, and I think that's one thing about my trip, I'll say. So I got to experience all 4 seasons in 2 months. I got the
wow.
snow, I got the weather, I got the Arizona heat, that whole thing.
Mhm.
Really got connected to how much we're living in the cycle of life, and that the seasons include our internal
Oh,
experience with
absolutely.
the outer world.
Yeah, I
So,
heard something the other day saying, you're either in a, you're in a growing, a reaping, uh,
mhm.
there's a time, winter time, it's cold. I'm not a big outdoor person. And, I find I kind of go in and stay in and do some projects in the house and other things that you put off
Like,
when it's nice out. I'm not going to be in my house.
right, right.
And so taking the time to work on us is
Yes.
so necessary.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love all the courage and all your stories. I know you got lots of things we could talk about otherwise, but we're just going to leave it at that. So I always talk when I do these, I always try to trace it back to my dad. And
Yeah.
like you said, you've never didn't know my dad.
Yep.
And most people are like, I don't know, didn't know your dad, heard of them, or I didn't know him. But so lots of things you said. First of all, I remember that day at Christmas, I came to visit you in your office and you kind of gave me the little tour. There was somebody you worked with. He's
Mhm.
like, you introduced me with Leslie Kane. He's like, I know your dad or knew your dad. I don't know if he was
Right.
still alive. He may have been alive at that point, but
Mhm.
somebody that worked with my dad years ago. So my dad's background was actually architecture.
Mhm.
That's what he went to school for.
Yeah.
He ended up doing more city planning, but so you definitely have that connection.
Mhm.
Obviously the trip that he did this adventure
Yeah.
trip with us, and he grew up in California.
Okay.
He grew up in LA, and I remember on our trip going to Huntington Beach and driving past there. And it was summertime, but I remember going in the ocean and it was freezing. Um, yeah, and then also just the remote working part of the trip. That
Yeah.
was so much like what he did.
Yeah.
And not having a plan, which I love.
Well, and I love that his remote working was like way before its time. Like
Yeah.
I can just picture him at a payphone, doing business. Like that is
Yeah, he
just
was so ahead. If you look back, so ahead of his time. Because when I was 10, my grandfather passed away
okay.
in California. And
Mhm.
literally, I remember coming home from school and my mom's like, pack your bags. We're going to California. And my dad was on a trip. And actually, we met him at the bottom of the hill in the cab and he jumped in the car and we all went to the airport and we went to California. And that was in October. We stayed there until March.
Oh,
February,
wow.
March, I think. We stayed in my grandfather's house to settle the estate. And honestly, my dad wanted to move back to California.
I
And
bet.
so
Yeah.
that was his goal. But my mom stayed there with us kids, which I remember it was funny. She has 4 kids. There were only 4 of us at that point. And like literally packed suitcases. So she went to Toys R Us and popped the trunk open and it was like Christmas.
I love
But
it.
oh my gosh, we had so many fun adventures being there. But he flew back and forth because his business was all over and he worked remotely from there. And then I remember being his kids, we'd go on trips. And we didn't necessarily go on spring break. They just pull us out of school and we'd go on trips. If he had a job in Maine. So we all went to Maine. And I remember going to LL Bean in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
because you
Right.
could go shopping in the middle of the night. So yeah, we just jumped in the car and whenever we just traveling. Yeah, he did remote work long before remote work.
Right.
Yeah.
What a great foundation for you. Like what a great just, upbringing that you had. And I know everybody has their challenges. I'm not by any
Oh
means
yeah.
saying perfect childhood, but at the same time, it's like what a great foundation and what a roadmap he gave you so early in life. That's such again, back to the blessings.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And
yeah.
as I'm getting older and realizing the things, and as I'm doing this podcast and talking about him more,
Hmm.
it's just really eye-opening that I
Yeah.
am very much like him and following a path. And yeah,
Yeah.
I've got to do that trip one of these days.
Love
So,
it. Yeah.
well, thank you for being our guest. If anybody listening, watching, Please go subscribe. Especially I heard the other day that if you subscribe to Apple, the podcast on Apple, it helps the numbers, but review it, rate it, share it with a friend. We're starting to do some fun things locally. If you're listening from Northern Virginia area, I'm kicking off Why Not Connects lunch on Thursday. And my first guest is Miss Mina Lucks teaching about feng shui. Yay. And I'm going to do some other things to gather people and connect and build community. And then maybe take it on the road. Maybe that's my road trip.
Ooh, I love it.
I do have Why Not Today t-shirts and cups. If anybody wants any, you can find them on the website, which is just whynottodaypodcast.com. And keep coming back. We are now on a weekly episode. And I think I'm going to start adding 1 week with just me sharing lessons I've learned through this process. So thanks again, Mina, for being my guest. And thank you for everybody for listening and watching the Why Not Today podcast. And as I always say, why not today?